Hey, what's up guys, it's Mark Yoon and today I'm bringing up a hopefully exciting video. So today is the video that I've been talking about recently. It's the video to end all financial discussion videos. I did a deep dive into Soulcalibur, every game, and not only that but comparative games, just to talk about things like the budget issues and why guests are required in these games in order to fund them and stuff like that, so we can hopefully put this to bed and finally move on with I guess talking about characters that we want to be in the game but probably will never ever be in the game. The first thing I want to talk about is the sales for the Soulcalibur series. So there actually aren't any sales numbers for Soul Edge or for Soulcalibur 3, and I'll get into that, why that is, when we get to that. But the first number that we have here is Soulcalibur in 1999, and it sold 1 million copies. Soulcalibur 2 sold 2 million copies. Soulcalibur 3 isn't listed, and that's because it was partially paid for and developed by Sony. So they actually required that Soulcalibur 3 was a PlayStation 2 exclusive, and that really hurt the sales for that game, which in doing so actually hurt Soulcalibur 4 going into it. So Soulcalibur 4 was 2.32 million sales. Soulcalibur 5 was only 1.38 million sales, so we haven't seen a lower game besides Soulcalibur 1 in the whole series. And Soulcalibur 6, as of recently, as of February, has sold 1.1 million copies. And these are rough estimates, so for the newer generation ones, this doesn't really count digital. They don't really release their digital information, this is just physical alone. And we're going to get into a little bit of that. So, Soul Edge was a popular arcade game, obviously, in Japan, at Soul Blade in America, and it required a port which came over to the PlayStation 1. Soulcalibur 1 was on the Dreamcast, and it sold 1 million copies based off the popularity of Soul Edge. So it was a good benchmark to start the series off with, especially for a little known or niche fighting game. But there were other games that we'll get into that had much higher sales, especially in their own company. So with Soulcalibur 2 being developed, they didn't really make enough profit off of the game to spend a lot of time in the budget, but they did make enough money to warrant a sequel. So when Soulcalibur 2 came out, they shopped around their property and they tried to find production studios that would help with the finances. And in doing so, they approached 3 different studios, and well, actually they approached many, but 3 different studios were accepted. So Nintendo helped pay for the game, but they wanted Link from Zelda, which is like their flagship character, to be a guest character on the GameCube version exclusively. Tom McFarlane was also interested, so he put forth Spawn for the Xbox version, as we all know. And then on the PlayStation 3, on the PlayStation, it was supposed to be Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy, but something happened with the deal and the finance fell through from Square Enix, so they actually opted for an in-house character, which was Heihachi Mishima, because Tekken Studio is like underneath of Bandai Namco also. It's their biggest fighting game franchise, so it was a lot easier to get them to chip in and help with their character, which would also cross-promote Tekken as well. So that did fairly well. It sold 2 million sales, and there were obviously no digital sales at the time, but they didn't really hit that benchmark that they wanted to hit, because when we look at their comparative sales to another studio, which would be Tekken, they really were getting blown out of the water sales-wise. And even back then, after Soulcalibur 2, Project Soul, their funding was drastically cut because of the poor sales. It still was enough to warrant a sequel, but they had to shop it around. So Sony offered, since they actually made pretty decent money, and it was like easy for them with Heihachi to promote their games, that they actually opted to help produce the game in-house completely. That's why in Soulcalibur 3 we get a completely new graphics engine, we get a complete overhaul of the system. Some say it's a little bit slower. A lot of single-player content, including Chronicles of the Sword, which is my favorite, and Create a Character made its debut. But since they developed it in-house, it was required that it was only an exclusive to Sony. So since it only appeared on the PlayStation 2, its sales were hurt really bad because people had already played the second one on Xbox and GameCube, so they expected to at least get the next iteration of the game on their own consoles. But we've already talked about Soul Edge being arcade, and then PS1, and then Soulcalibur being on Dreamcast, so this has already been shopped around to different studios and stuff like that, and it's changed hands many times at this point. So when they needed funding for Soulcalibur 4, The Force Unleashed was coming out, and Lucas Games, or LucasArts, was actually shopping around possibilities of using their characters and guests so they can promote the Force Unleashed. So they paid Project Soul, and they helped develop it, but their contingency was not only are they going to put Starkiller in their games, but they're also going to make sure that he's a big part of the story. And that's why in Soulcalibur 4, the whole Star Wars cast, unlike many other guests, was actually a part of the story. They were featured heavily on the box art, including the back. They were promoted heavily, and the other consoles got exclusives in the form of Vader on the PS3 and Yoda on the Xbox 360, which later on would become DLC for both consoles, so you can own both. But they actually were the ones that helped pay for that game, and that sold 2.32 million, which is I think about 300,000 copies more than Soulcalibur 2 had sold, so it was considered a success. And since a lot of their budget was like restrained, it was easier to rely on other studios to help pick up the slack where they were missing. So their games thus far have been pretty much, with the exception of Soul Edge, been paid for by other studios because their Bandai Namco gives them little to no budget, and we'll find out why in a second. So when Soulcalibur 5 was released, they tried to do the same thing, and at the time Assassin's Creed 2 was out and was big, so they decided to do cross promotion with them. They approached Ubisoft, and they were given a character that was created by the Ubisoft team, which is Dampierre, who was never returned again, and they received Ezio Auditore for his guest character from Assassin's Creed 2. That only sold 1.38 million, which was like lower than Soulcalibur 2, and pretty much the second lowest selling game in the series. Soulcalibur 6 obviously came out in 2018, it's a big part of this channel, and they had little to no budget coming off of that poor of a sale. So they shopped around a different idea this time. Let's put the game out into in the esports tournaments, and the tournaments will help pay for the development of the game. So it was rushed out. I believe the development time was under 2 years. They just ported over a bunch of assets from Soulcalibur 5. Characters were missing day one, and they called it a day. Because Tiara was eventually supposed to be on disc at launch, but they didn't make the deadline, but they released it anyway and made her pre-order bonus and DLC. Total lifetime sales has been 1.1 million, which is the second now to date worst selling Soulcalibur game. It still was considered a financial success, but that's only because the studios didn't put that much money out to pay for it. They ported over a lot of assets from Soulcalibur 5, and other studios paid for it. So, but this time they tried to go a little bit different route, and instead of having like their characters be promoted and just one studio helping pay for it and splashing it all over the game, they shopped it around to multiple studios again. And this time, that's why we got The Witcher, we got Geralt, so their studio helped pay for it. And then we also got 2B, we also got Hamaru, and we're going to likely be getting one more guest in the Season 3, which is going to be the final pass for Soulcalibur 6. So we can see why that they use these characters. The biggest reason is mainly cross-promotion. Other studios want to get their characters out there, but that's why they only use flagship characters. They don't use like any kind of, it's not based on popular vote. They'll put out popularity polls, but that's because they already have multiple characters lined up and they just want to see which ones they're going to go with and which would sell more. And this is not for the people. This is mainly to show the investors that there is financial incentive to put money in their studio so that they can actually help pay for the game. That's why when people are like, oh, I want to see this side character or this side character, it doesn't matter about the popularity of the character. It matters solely on the studio's discretion, and Bandai Namco also has to approve it because they're the ones that are providing the external budget and getting paid directly by these other studios, these outside studios. So when comparing, we see this is around the total sales is about like 12 million or something like that. And people would say, okay, that's pretty good. But if we go over and we look at another studio, such as Tekken 1 in 1995 sold 1 million. So the same as Soulcalibur. But Tekken 2, it was such a success for Tekken 1, especially in arcades, that Tekken 2 sold 5.7 million worldwide. Tekken 3 trumped even that with 8.5 million. Tekken Tag Tournament had 2.367 million, which was their poorest selling one since Tekken 1, but it also did better than all of the Soulcalibur games. Tekken 5 sold a whopping 8.2 million. Tekken 5 sold 6 million. Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, which was just a PSP game, sold more than the Soulcalibur games at 2.2 million. Tekken 6 sold 3.5 million. Tekken Tag Tournament 2 sold 1.5 million. But again, this is not including digital sales, because it was widely sold well on digital. I even purchased it myself digitally on PS3. And Street Fighter Cross Tekken, even though that was considered a financial flop, also sold 1.97 million. Now, this has nothing to do with the critical acclaim for the game, because Soulcalibur has gotten good scores. Soulcalibur 6 has a Metacritic score of 86 out of 100. OneUp.com gave it an A. Edge gave it 8 out of 10. EGM gave it a 9 out of 10. Eurogamer 8 out of 10. GamePro 4 out of 5. And GameSpot 8.2 out of 10. So this isn't saying that the games are poorly received, and that's why the budget's that way. It's also not saying that we're getting guest characters based on popularity, because those guest polls are exclusively for investors and financial incentivizers that are going to put money into the game. That's nothing to do with the fans. We're just there to pretty much show them that they're going to receive a return on investment, or an ROI, which means that the money that they put in, they're going to get back, and they're going to get more in the way of promotions, or in the way of cross promotion, or marketing, or anything to that nature. And they have, because anytime that you're like, even with movies, you have your budget, and then you have to double your budget for marketing. So they kill two birds with one stone, because the outside companies pay for the marketing and they help pay for the budget. So they really have no budget, and it's a niche game that's almost been canceled multiple times if they didn't get these outside sources. Basically saying, if Sony didn't help pay for Soulcalibur 3, we would have never got it. Soulcalibur 2 would have been the last Soulcalibur game. It was threatened to close already. Project Soul was threatened to being closed. Soulcalibur 4, if LucasArts or Lucasfilms didn't step in to pay for with the Force Unleashed characters, it would have been canceled. It wouldn't have happened. Same thing with 5. Same thing with 6. I say these things not to scare anyone if this Soulcalibur fan that the series could end at any time, but it can. So whether or not they're porting over a small amount of assets from 5, they need to extend the game's life cycle so that they can push to their investors that they are supporting the game 2 years after its life cycle. Which is why when you buy a season pass, the characters take so long, because they're trying to get the licensing rights for the guest character, and that's the whole reason why they actually even get the DLC in the first place. If we didn't have those guest characters and those passes, we wouldn't have DLC. So all of our favorite characters that we've gotten back, we would have never got, including like the upcoming Setsuka and Huang. Now, what we can do to help is financially supporting any way we can, which means buying the DLC, including the season passes. And this also means like answering all those fan polls and stuff like that, because even though they don't care what we want, it does give incentive to the fundraisers and to the investors that this game is desired and is not just a niche community game. We're going to talk a little bit more on this stuff later throughout the week, but this is what I just wanted to come up with today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you have any questions or anything, you know where to find me and hit me up. Links as always are in my description box. And with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to a close. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you.